In this section, I want to talk about some miscellaneous topics on BGP. And if I go to router 1, if you remember, I added an output filter to all of my peers. If I open router 4, I can see that at community is here. On router 3, at community is here. And on router 2, again, I can see at community there. What if I want to apply another output filter, for example, only to router 3? Is it possible? You can see that it is not possible. We only have one output filter. But in MicroTik, there is a very interesting feature that I want to show you. Remove all of these from output filters. On all my routers, I want to remove this output filter. And if I go to instance and double click on this, you can see that there is an output filter here that will be applied to all of my peers at once. So if I select that community here, it is like I have added at community to all of my peers. Now if I go to router 2 and check one of these routes, for example, using IP routing table, and that's 11.11.11, you can see that the community no export is here. And if I go and check this on router 3 and 4, I can see the same thing there. Okay, now if I want to add another output filter, for example, something that is only applied to router 3, I can go here and add this output filter as well. Next thing I want to talk about is TCP MD5 key. If you want to have authentication between two routers, you can add a key here. This is very simple and this is quite streamlined. You just add a key here, and after a moment you can see that it is gone. You cannot have established unless you have the key on the other side. So let's go to router 3 and select router 1 and add the same MD5 key here. And if I click on OK, after a moment you should see the connection is going to go into established state. Now these are very simple topics here. Some of the other things that are present in BGP tabs, such as remove private AS override, I'm going to talk about them later, and allow AS in. I want to give you an example about allow AS in later sections when I'm done with MPLS, but AS override is specifically relative to MPLS. So let me talk about these topics when I am talking about MPLS. And something about remote port, you can see that if you want to change the port here, it is quite possible. On the contrary to other platforms such as Cisco, in Cisco you have no control on the port, but here you can select a port to create a connection, but I prefer to have it 179. And there is here hold time, keep alive time, time to leave that you can select and change the value. And there's a max prefix limit. You can select to receive some specific counts, some specific prefixes. You can select to have a specific number of prefixes, of course. For example, if you are neighbor with router 2, you can accept only 200 prefixes from that if you enter the value here. This way you do not overload your routing table and your BGP database with the routes that come from router 2. And you have a max prefix restart time that relates to these prefixes. I do not want to change them, and these are the things that I needed to talk about. If I go to instance BGP instance, you can see that we have almost talked about all items here except cluster ID. Cluster ID is a very simple thing here. Suppose that you have 2 routers, 3, 4, 5, and 6 routers here, and you want to connect these routers to each other. If you want to do this, for example, this way, and add these together, or you can of course have a full mesh or any other topology. You can select to have route reflection enabled in this network. You can select to have all of these with one of these routers as route reflector, but I prefer to have two route reflector at the same time. If you want to have two route reflector, you need to have a cluster ID to show that these two route reflector are clustered together, are in one group, so that they act together. But if you add different cluster IDs to these route reflector, actually you have two different route reflector that they need to be aware of each other. So this is what route reflector cluster ID means here. And about redistribution, I want to talk about this in later sections. So these are the topics that I needed to talk about here. And I want to wrap up the BGP discussion and go for other topics.